We all know about homeless adults, but get this, nearly 2.5 million children in America were homeless at some point last year. That's according to a new report conducted by the National Center on Family Homelessness. Film director Rotimi Rainwater, he's working on a new documentary called Lost in America, which focuses on the ugly side of the world that these children face every day. They encounter everything from sex trafficking to a broken foster care system. Rotimi, he spoke to me about his film. First, though, here's a look at a clip from the documentary.
Some kids can go home, but other kids don't have a home to go to. Some kids aren't out here by choice, they're out here because they have to be.
Imagine if the one who's supposed to love you the most didn't.
My dad hates gays, which was his exact words. And he says because I'm gay that I'm not a kid and all this other stuff. He busted a couple of my ribs. My dad stabbed me in my side. I have a scar from my dad. Dad's tried to kill me once or twice.
And that wherever you went, everyone treated you like they wish you didn't exist.
That's the idea that everybody should just take care of their own. And so when people do that, they get very short-sighted, kind of like NIMBYism, right? We forget that there's some people out there who don't have the things that we have. What happens to those guys?
Now imagine this is no longer a figment of your imagination. Imagine this is reality.
You know, I've seen here a new report came out which talked about the rise of homelessness of children in the United States here, and the figure is staggering that about 2.5 million kids at one point from this report, which chronicled through 2013, were deemed homeless at one point every day in the United States. Talk about that. And is this problem getting worse here? I know for a lot of us, these kids live in the shadows, but 2.5 million, it seems like a huge number.
Well, it is, and the problem is the government's actually never done a national study, so the numbers that they're throwing out have been varying so much. HUD had put out a number of 60,000, and then the National Runaway Safe Line, which is their hotline, says it's between 1.3 and 2.8 million. So we've traveled all over the country, and we have found children everywhere that are homeless for one reason or another. So the number is staggering, and the problem is just getting worse.
Talk about some of the reasons why, and I should mention that November is Youth Homeless Awareness Month. I know that you talk about this, and it'll be part of your documentary. There's a shortage of beds for kids. A large population here either identify themselves as either gay or transgender, and their families, in a lot of cases, don't want any part of them. Why are we seeing, such huge spikes, and where are these populations coming from?
Well, the populations, unfortunately, are coming from everywhere. There are no communities that don't have homeless youth. And, the reason that these youth are homeless are generally for three reasons. There's generally because home doesn't exist anymore, whether because of a death in the family or because economic downturn, or because the home isn't safe for them anymore because of physical or sexual or emotional abuse, or we're seeing a large part, roughly 40 to 45% of all homeless youth are identified as LGBT, which makes up the third reason why they're homeless, which is home just doesn't want them anymore. And they come out, and for one reason or another, the family just doesn't accept them and kicks them out.
And the ages of these kids, the average age you found, 14.7 years of age. My God, we're talking freshmen in high school, which is the norm. And obviously by the math here, you got some kids much younger than that. I shudder to think what they find on the streets when they have to go there.
Oh, it's horrible. The problem is these kids wind up on the streets, and once they wind up on the streets, they realize that the communities don't really want them there, and that there's not enough support from the government or from the state for them. So we've found children as young as 11, 12, and 13 years old who become victims, and a large portion of these children become victims of sexual predators. The numbers, it's approximately 75% of all youth who end up on the street gets propositioned for sex favors within the first 48 hours. So there's a huge, alarming number of youth who are becoming trafficked in sex traffic right now.
I know this is a personal story for you. You yourself, when you were 19, came back to help out an ailing relative, your mother, and then you found yourself through a confluence of events also on the streets for, I think, 9 months, right, when you were 19?
Yes. My mother had cancer and I was in the Navy, and it took a while to get out. And by the time I got home, she had already lost her place, was in a long-term hospital and in hospice care, and had no true place I could turn to, had a relative there who had turned her back on us. So I spent the next 9 months sleeping in my car, sleeping in a park, doing whatever I could to hide it from my mother because she had enough going on with this fight. And, my time on the street, while it wasn't filled with panhandling, definitely gave me a bird's eye view or a unique perspective at the feeling of abandonment, the feeling of hopelessness that you get when people would much rather you not be there, when they look right through you. And it's a difficult place for any human being to be, but especially children who are not emotionally or physically equipped to deal with the real world yet.
I know that Senator Leahy's office, the senator from Vermont, and I believe it's with also Senator Collins as well, they asked you to help him out on a project. Why don't you tell the audience about that?
Yes, the Runaway Homeless Youth Act, which is the federal government's act to help homeless youth and runaway youth and fund the organizations that help them, it comes up for renewal every couple of years. And they have the Leahy-Collins Runaway Homeless Youth Act that they're trying to push through the Senate right now. And it requests money to be able to fund these policies, but also it is requesting to expand some of the projects that they're doing, but also to pay for the very first national study on this, which is just alarming to us that, in the last 30, 40, or 50 years that the Runaway Homeless Youth Act, or that these issues have been around, that the government has never done a national study on this issue. But there's definitely pushback that they've witnessed or they've experienced in the Senate. So we're using a portion of our film where we interviewed Senator Leahy along with some of the youth to show the impact that homelessness has on these youth and to show the importance of this issue.
Rotimi, I saw one of the clips where there was a young boy here. I don't know how old he was, but you guessed 13 or 14, looking at him, and he said, "They didn't want me at home anymore." And as a parent who's got kids right around that age, you'd imagine he is as well, the idea that they'd be out on the streets with all, forget about the natural dangers, but all the other as well, in America, not some third world country, is just, it boggles the mind. So your film's trying to make this, shine a light on this, and I know you could use some help from the audience at home to make it happen, because you're going across the country here showing the stories of these kids. So tell people at home how they can help.
We can go on lostinamericafilm.com. We have been doing Indiegogo and crowdsource funding. We're almost 3/4 of the way done with filming. We only have to go back out on the road one more time, and then we have to finish editing. But these youth really need us to tell the story. The way that we look at this film is we're giving a voice to the voiceless, and to use that young person you saw in the film, his name is Caleb, and he's actually a transgender youth, and was thrown out of the house, and as he said, stabbed and beaten when he came out to his father. And being a young woman who's transitioning and sees herself as a young man, it's just so dangerous out there for her, and it's so dangerous out there for the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of kids who are on the streets. And there's never been a film on a national level like this that has made America face this issue that for so long we've tried to ignore. And so we truly need everybody's help to be able to get the word out about what we're doing and to be able to help these youth, because they're our own kids. They're not somebody else's, they're our own.
And again, this month being National Youth Homeless Awareness Month, we hope there's an additional attention paid to it in November here. Rotimi, I really appreciate a few minutes, and I wish you the best of luck with your film.
Thank you very much, sir.
Coming up next, we will head to a place called Pluto. The documentary profiles the life of Greg O'Brien, who's battling Alzheimer's disease. He shares a story with us about the disease, his daily struggles, and how he gets through it all. That after the break.